Welcome to Wedding Day Podcast with your hosts, Sonja Babbage, CEO of Iron Diamond Media, a leading wedding resource featuring 7 localized wedding brands across the country, and Dan Riggs, photography and videography expert and founder of Summit Hill Studios. Come along as they travel from state to state to connect with the most creative and well-respected professionals in the wedding industry. Every episode will arm you with the hottest new trends, wedding day tips and details, and they'll show you all the joys of planning your perfect wedding day.
Hi everybody, this is Sonja Babbage with Wedding Day Podcast. I'm here with Brooke Beise, publisher of Minnesota Bride and Nebraska Wedding Day. And we are sitting with one of our 2 great members and friends, Don and Ralph, with Flutterby Celebrations and Ceremonies. Yeah. Well, we are thrilled to have you, and we, of course, want to start right away of just like what's your story before we get into all the good details of your profession with being officiating beautiful and wonderful love stories, weddings. Mm-hmm. So how did you get into this, Don?
Well, I went into public relations in college, and it was definitely my goal to be a big PR professional, and I graduated and I got introduced to the event side of public relations, and I loved it. And it paid $17,000 a year. So I was like, okay, well, that's not going to work. I live in Silicon Valley, California. It's not going to work. So I got scooped up by Western athletic clubs, and I became a corporate event planner. And that was great until it was very obvious that I'm social. I'm very social.
She is.
And I went right into the wedding planning from that point. And a lot of that wedding planning was catering. So I was selling the catering, I was selling the venue, I was selling a lot of those things that come along with an event. And that was about 3 years, and I moved to Minnesota. And when I moved to Minnesota, I started at a country club. And then from there, I started at a big venue, and so I was the director of catering events. So because I was at a place that looked more like a wedding venue, that's what I ended up doing. There was corporate there, but it pretty much ended up being a wedding venue. And I did that for 18 years. Yes. So of course the age was happening, and I was kind of like, okay, I like it, I love it, but my body's not loving it anymore. So what can I do to stay connected with all my beautiful people in the industry locally and still make a living? And my wonderful husband gave me the blessing to quit that job, and it was good.
Not that she needed it.
Yeah. Yes. The support.
We needed the 2 incomes, but mine was going to change drastically. And that venue actually decided not to do events anymore.
Yeah.
And it was gorgeous.
Can we share it?
Absolutely.
It's very kind of historic where you worked for 18 years.
Yes. Carlson Towers Rotunda. I worked for a company called Bon Appetit Management Company. So it was their account. And I was there for 18 years, really loved it, but it was difficult for one leader.
Yes, I remember when you said that, that's what the venue you ran, my mouth just dropped to the floor because I remember hearing so many friends of my sisters getting married there because it was just so beautiful with the fountain inside.
We loved it.
Yeah.
And I understand why it ended and all that stuff, and everybody has to look out for their businesses.
Everybody has a history.
But the timing was perfect for me.
Yeah.
And so I just rolled right into Flutterby, and I drove a limo for Renee's for a little while. I worked for Sarah Trotter with Lasting Impressions for a little while. I did stuff.
Yeah.
And I was having so much fun because when I was a little girl in elementary school, they have you draw a picture of what you want to be when you grow up. I was driving a stretch limo. So I got that out of the way. And then Flutterby, because I know so many people, and I was older. Maturity really goes a long way when you are starting to officiate weddings. Mm-hmm. And I have a journalism degree. Mm-hmm. And so I started writing about love and unions, and I'm married, and I kind of know a little bit about a little something. And so I just started writing ceremonies, and it took off. I got busy very quickly. Second, third year, I started thinking, uh-oh, I better hire somebody. Or should I, or shouldn't I? And Ralph's in the kitchen like, excuse me? And I'm, okay, all right, let me think about that. living together, working together. Okay. Well, anyway, I hired him. And then we decided we are going.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
I hired him. We just wanted to be a mom and pop. We didn't want to grow beyond that. I didn't want to go back to the busyness of my former job. I didn't want to do any of that. I wanted to hone in on that couple. I wanted to make sure that they got everything I could give them. And I wasn't, my mind wasn't full of somebody else's wedding. So we do no more than 2 a day. One for Ralph, one for me. I usually take the first one, and then Ralph comes in and takes the second one. I write them all. Ralph officiates and runs a rehearsal. I write, officiate, and run the rehearsal.
Wow. I want to toot your horn a little bit, and actually the both of you. I've seen you in action at Carlson, and I remember thinking like, as like a vendor that came in to help out with a wedding that was at Carlson Towers, I'm like, she's got everything under control. What am I doing? I can just sit back. We're like, I'm,
a little type A and then some.
But it's such a beautiful way that you are in charge. And then, hearing that you're going to do ceremonies and watching you in action, there is a pure candor and cadence to what you do that cannot be taught, and that does come from your journalism background. That is so beautifully the scripts you write, and not only that, but the cadence that you have are able to create because of your journalism background is really, really beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, it came in handy.
And Ralph is just chimed right in there.
Yeah, listen to that voice.
Seen both of you
voice.
in action, and you're both just the same. It's beautiful, both of you.
Yeah, and actually, technically, she hired me well before Flutterby, when she was at the Carlson Towers.
Oh,
She
true.
What
were you doing?
I need somebody to do setup. So literally wheeling 8-foot tables. It's 300 people.
And we were dating.
Yeah.
It was the only way you could see.
Just dated. It's like, you do all of it. And to your point, Brooke, it just gave me a totally different level of respect for her and what she does. And in the industry, it's phenomenal what she does. Then I get to do the fun part now of the officiating piece. But yeah, technically I was her employee going back 20 plus years.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I think all spouses have become an employee to every company that they hire somebody.
Whether they're paid or not.
Exactly.
That's right. That's right.
Chris got to golf, so that was his.
There you go.
So let's definitely dive in more with the PR background, writing the vows.
Oh.
I think, I just always bring personal in to help drive the boat. Again, I was in a church, a Lutheran wedding, and you don't really write your vows when you're in that setting. Right. So, but you kind of want to. Your heart wants to say how much you love who you're marrying, your best friend, your spouse. But how do you tackle that when it's when you're officiating the vow aspect? Some people come to you like, "Can you help me?" Or I want to do it myself. I want somebody else to do it.
Yeah. So the vows are interesting because you take me back 5 years ago, and it was always like a repeat after me, and I'd present those vows to them, and they'd be like, okay, let's tweak this word, tweak that word. Well, now they want to write their own vows. They need a little bit of help, but they don't necessarily want to say their vows, these personal vows that they wrote in front of everybody, because they get double nervous. So they're doing it during first look, which is very popular, and then they do a repeat after me during the wedding. So those vows are not as important as they used to be. Not like today. They're very important, obviously. But what they said privately to each other was more important. So they start with, and if they say, hey, how do I write them? What do I do? I always say you can get inspiration from the internet for sure. Definitely. Just words. It's like, oh, I like that word. Or, oh yeah, I want to tell a story. Oh, that reminds me of when I knew I loved her.
Yeah.
Tell that story. Tell that story about, like last weekend, it was really cute. She worked in a cubicle, and she wore shiny tennis shoes, sequined and the whole thing. And she sat next to the printer, and he would come by all the time and kind of check her out. And finally, he decided to say, hey, shiny shoes. And luckily, she responded nicely. And he was making lots of copies after that and honing his flirting skills. And I married them last Saturday.
That's
And I
amazing.
told that story.
Did she have shiny shoes?
She didn't. But yeah, she didn't. Yeah. But so the vows for them, you tell that story.
Yeah.
You say that so the two of them laugh and maybe even cry a little bit. And you say, this is what I love about you. I love your eyes. I love the way you talk to me in the morning. And then you finish it with, I promise. I promise this. I promise that. I promise this. I promise we'll always have a dog. I promise never to pick up your socks. I promise this. It's personal.
Yeah.
I don't hear them. Sometimes I don't read them. Sometimes I do, because the groom is like, could you read these and help me? And of course I do. One time I marked it up so bad it wasn't even his work anymore, but he asked me to. And then the repeat after me is modern, contemporary, real, authentic, but none of this till death do us part or anything that says obey. So it's a contemporary version of what you want to say to your spouse, and nothing that's going to make you nervous.
Yeah, I think I did a wedding just like 2 months ago, and it was the first one in years where they actually, and God bless them, they wanted definitely something much more traditional, to love and honor, to have and to hold, but that's like 2% of maybe the couples. And Dawn is great because with the various wedding scripts and ceremonies that she's written, she can present, this is a repeat after me, here's a couple of options, and sometimes couples to really make it them, and this is what we want them to do, make it your own. These are words that have worked with others, and they'll oftentimes just morph and change that and say, well, I like this from this one, but this is merging those two together and making it, the whole goal is to make it a reflection of them and what they really, really want. And if they go overboard, Dawn knows enough to kind of reel them in, right? And in guiding them through that whole process it's amazing when I watch her do that. And the end result, of course, is the joy of the moment. It's when that really, really shows. And even more so, the end result is when I read personally on different sites where a couple may give their review, and where they say, Dawn was able to take who we were, the essence of, and it was such a beautiful ceremony. That is the biggest compliment. Right?
So it reflects them.
Absolutely, that's the whole goal.
Let's talk about like editing the vows. So is there times you're like, oh buddy, this is a little scandalous for your grandma's ears? Like, that can get to a point, right? Like, I love your body. That may not be good for grandma's ears, right?
Yes, that hasn't happened yet, Sonia.
I have heard it.
I
was sitting like, oh!
That wasn't a Flutterby ceremony.
That was not a Flutterby
There you go.
Yeah, but how do you think?
Well, when I was pretty green,
Yeah.
I was learning. I was learning too.
We all learn.
Yeah,
and we
God,
continue
I was
to
learning.
learn.
This is so new to me. And they wrote their own vows, and when they write their own vows, I give the microphone to the groom or the bride, whoever wants to go first, and I walk away. Well, one of my first ones, the bride pulled out 4 pages.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, God. And he had 2 paragraphs. And I was like, oh, no.
And I think we need to say why that 4 pages is why I was like, oh, it ruins the buzz for your guests.
Yes.
You think they want to hear 4 pages.
Guest experience is sometimes forgotten when you are in the moment.
Yes.
And so that's when you lose your guests.
Yeah, they'll capture the first half of the first page, but after that, you're absolutely right, Sonia. You will lose.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I have to reel back a lot. But I didn't know at that time. I didn't think she'd pull out 4 pages. And then when he pulled out his 2 paragraphs, I'm sure everybody's like, phew.
Yeah.
But it didn't look cool.
Yeah.
Here he's talking about her.
It felt like mediocre in a way.
She loves me more, and that's not what you want. No. So I learned, that was the first learning experience. And then I was like, okay, how long should those vows be? So I tell people 1 minute.
Question.
Because I know they're going to go over 1 minute.
Yeah.
So say 1 minute, right? And then if they say, well, what's the max? I say 1.5 minutes. What about 2 minutes? It's your wedding. It's your wedding. If you want it to be 2 minutes, you let it be 2 minutes. But once you keep talking.
Yeah.
I love that you said that, because everybody's like, oh, I just want to be a 30-minute ceremony. Right. And if they work with a non-educated professional officiant, it will be 10 or 15 minutes. And it just goes so fast. And that's why it's key to work with professionals, because they will help you streamline to make sure it's a nice orchestrated event.
Such a good point, Sonja, because I mean, we do, or Dawn does also do mini or elopements. So if they want something but they don't want it in a judge's chamber, she can write something that can be 12 minutes and it fits that particular moment. But when we meet with couples, we tell them kind of the guardrails, if you will, would be maybe 15 minutes, but 15 minutes, 30 minutes is about that sweet spot. Any less than that, people are going to look around like, sort of what just happened. Longer than that, you're just going to lose people. And luckily, there haven't been too many couples that have kind of pushed back. There was one in particular that, and it was the groom for this particular, and we were just doing the interview, and he wanted to do all of these elaborate things. And well, maybe that's just not, not us. And I said, typically 30 minutes is about the right spot. He said, well, you're trying to force fit me into a certain time. Well, believe me, just with the experience that we have, to your point, you don't want to lose your guests. And he was adamant. And luckily, it's maybe 2% of the couples. If that's what you want to do, then great. It's your day. We may not be the best fit for you.
Which I love that you guys also shared how important it is to set the tone with the ceremony.
Yes. Yeah. The thing is, okay, so I moved my world to be at this wedding. Okay, I'm not the officiant, I'm a guest. I moved my world. I had to get a pet sitter. I'm coming from Florida.
Yeah.
And I moved my world. I had to pay for a hotel, I'm bringing a gift, all this kind of stuff. I want those guests, when they walk into that ceremony, to have this first impression of, oh, so worth it. Yeah. I love this couple, but now I love it even more because I'm going to have a great experience. Yep. So I want my couples to wake up the next day not regretting anything, and I want the guests to wake up the next day and say, that was fun.
Yes.
That was great. From the minute that ceremony started all the way to the end, I had so much fun.
Yep.
Yeah.
And when I do a ceremony and I have people walking up to me and saying, how long have you known the couple? And I'm like, well,
6 months.
Not very long. But they're just as important to me that day as they are to everybody else.
Yeah.
And so I put my all into it. And I do want them to walk up and say, wow, it seemed like you had known them forever. I want to get, that is the best ceremony I ever heard. Oh, thank you. That's what I want.
I love that.
I'm very, I don't want a phone call. I had plenty of phone calls in my catering years on Monday and Tuesday. You guys didn't go through a second coffee service or whatever. I don't want those phone calls, and I don't get them.
No.
So it works out pretty well.
Actually, the opposite. I love reading reviews on different sites. And when a couple says, it's like when we first met Dawn and Ralph, it's like they were long lost friends. And we had just met these people because you have that connection. And then coupled with that is when they give some feedback that our guests just, they couldn't stop raving about how beautiful that ceremony. That is just so,
that's nice.
You're right there in, I'm a musician, so you're right in the groove.
It's like the cup of tea,
right?
Like the cherry on top is like, you want the couple to be happy, but when you hear that the crowd, it's like the ceremony is kind of a show.
Yeah, it is.
You have to entertain your guests.
Yeah.
You have to set the tone for the remaining of the wedding, and so it's an event.
Yeah. It's an event. And as you were talking, Sonja, I started thinking, one of the reasons why we are successful is because we do the rehearsal. And we don't just walk through it. We tell everybody, hey, what's your line? You tell them your
So
line, because I like this
when
line.
you
I don't want to
first
take
kick
it.
it off, everybody's there, the parents and the couple, of course. And because sometimes you're going to get, and typically, sorry, groomsmen, but typically it's a guy that just, he doesn't quite fit right. He doesn't want to stand just right. And so I tell people that, keep in mind, we are the framework around this beautiful masterpiece of this couple. The last thing you want to do is to have the framework take anything away from the couple. So guy will ask the groom, when you stand, Fred, left over right, right over left, oh, left, okay guys, that's exactly how you're going to be standing with your hands left over right. Fred. And the pictures that you see, because I let them know that it's all about not just the ceremony, but their memories and the pictures. Because if you look at some pictures, one of my biggest pet peeves is when I see wedding pictures and everybody's standing, and you see the one guy that's standing like this, that's not the
looking out
person
at the
you want.
audience.
Yeah, that's not the person that you want to
Right.
be. Yeah.
And I talk to the girls. You know, I've been a bridesmaid. I have seen so many weird things coming down the aisle when there's no rehearsal. And it still happens now and then when there's a rehearsal because everybody's nervous.
Yeah.
But the night before or whenever I do that rehearsal, there is such a higher percentage that ceremony is going to go flawless. And everyone's going to be like, wow, that was really great. Girls have gone down with the bouquet right here.
Yeah.
Guys have gone down with a fist, like they're going to bop the groom at the end of the aisle.
Yeah.
I have seen it all. And the biggest thing I see, they go down without a smile. Not the girls so much. The grooms, they're very serious. They're taking their job serious, and they go down, and the corners of their mouth are down. And it's like, I'm at the altar like, smile.
I
You
love
can't
that you
redo
actually
that.
brought this up. I think people, couples need to remember this is a reflection of you, who you select in your bridal party. And so they also share the energy and the couple that you have become or are the couple that you are, who you're going to marry. And you should be honored when they select you.
Yeah,
That's
I
right.
say that. That is actually something I say. You guys were handpicked. So we're going to make our couple really proud of you.
You should
And
be honored.
this is what we're going to do.
So you should be honored that they picked you, and also honor them on their most special day by following. And that's in the rehearsal. That's what we really, really strive, and it's so important.
I was just thinking about, you have this whole dream team of wedding vendors.
Yes.
Amazing florist, caterer, your dream venue.
Yeah.
And guess what? You can get married without any of them except you guys.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
That
We make
is
it legal.
so,
Yeah.
I mean, they're all part of this beautiful day, but at the end of the day, it can't happen without the two of you, and you get that, and it's so, again, emotional talking about, but it's such a beautiful thing that you guys, the care that you guys take, and just
And we always say we have the best seat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, we see that one tear coming down the groom's face.
Yeah.
Very slow, kind of into the mouth. I see the nose running. I see all of it, and it's so sweet. And at first, again, when I started, it was hard not to cry. I would have my jaw really wanting to cry and release it. And at the end of the ceremony, because it was so emotional up there. And I get to see it all. We get to see it all, and I love it. We do carry a handkerchief in the back of our binder, so that if that does happen and they are not prepared, which usually they are not, we pull it right out of our binder, and they have it. So
sweet.
So last question,
Yes.
which we kind of prepped before we turn these cameras on.
yes.
Is the drinking before weddings. And of course, it's very common, and it can easily be taken care of and caught before it happens. But I have been a part of a wedding that I think I was the only sober person in the wedding party.
Yeah.
So
Are you
people
talking-
don't think about this.
Right, they don't. Are you talking about drinking, wedding party drinking guests, or both?
I say most importantly, the wedding party drinking before the ceremony.
It's the guys. I mean, again, I don't mean to pick on them, but oftentimes it's the guys that are a little more loopy. The girls, I really haven't had a problem with, but the guys sometimes, and some of these venues, they will actually charge you if they see that you have brought in alcohol and you are all getting basically drunk. before the ceremonies even started. They'll charge you. They'll take away the bottles, they'll charge the couple, and that's terrible for the couple to have to pay that, or the parents or something.
It's just mainly just the discussion point before to talk about is this in before the ceremony or not? What's our family decision? Right?
Right.
And
That's
just
right.
because there's so much money going out, and there's all these wedding professionals are giving up their day too to be here to celebrate this love story, to have sloshy wedding party, not enjoy the moment.
The worst that I saw at one time, it was heartbreaking for me actually. The groom must have had 4 or 5 drinks before, and he could barely keep his eyes open during the ceremony. So, and it's interesting, Sonia, because as an officiant, how much, you're right, that's a personal, I mean, they can make their own decision, but at the same time, I'm not in a position necessarily to tell someone that they're going to be cut off, but if that is a tendency, that's a very, very good point. Just giving, because we're there to give them guidelines and direction. So one thing you may want to consider is keep the celebration until after the ceremony, because it broke my heart when this guy could barely keep his eyes open.
Because
It was
when you're at a
heartbreaking.
venue, it's easy to have those bars, they're open.
That's right.
Right? And they're like, there's nothing to do right now. I might as well get a beer.
Yeah.
And then beer can turn to 2 beers, 3 beers.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of setting those ground rules.
That's right.
And I'm a big advocate of no drinking for the guests before the ceremony either.
Yeah.
Not only can a drink go down and break, not only can it be a disturbance, but when they get up to go into the other room, they leave their drinks there. Somebody's got to clean them up.
Yeah, and
that
photos
came from my catering.
too.
Photos, true.
Too, like you're all
Absolutely, yeah.
sitting there, you have a bush latte in your hand.
Yes, yeah.
Like that's not so sexy.
That's right.
Right? Or like, but again, it all depends on what kind of wedding you want. If you want drinks in your ceremony, that is their couple's choice. But it's good things to talk about.
Yeah, I agree.
One thing that we definitely stress with couples, and I would say a good 95% of them are in line with this, with what we share with them, is to unplug from technology. Instruct your guests, or invite your guests to unplug from technology right at the onset of the ceremony. We typically come up and make an announcement, please make sure your cell phones are silenced, and the couple want you just to unplug and please tuck your phones away. Don't do this. Number one, for the respect of the ceremony, but also for the videographers and photographers, right? Because it just makes, it gives that particular ceremony and that moment even that much more meaning.
I know. I think that's
it's not a social event.
I think it definitely is a good challenge to everybody. Put your phones away just because they hired professionals.
That's exactly right.
And we highlight in upcoming or already happened podcasts of being like, let the professionals do the work behind the camera.
That's
what they're there for. And then whip it out later. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
Just soak in the moment with the couple.
And if your ceremony is the right amount of time, it'll go by in a flash if it's interesting, and that's what we want to do, interesting, engaging. We get the whole set of guests involved in the ceremony in a couple different places, and the parents involved in a couple different places. And all of a sudden, they don't miss their phones because the ceremony just ended and they were actually engaged. So it's just as bad having your photos with a guest holding a phone as it is a beer. So we do bring all that up to make sure that we can avoid some of those things where they'll wake up the next day and say, I wish I had mentioned that I don't want any drinking before the ceremony.
Again, this is why we're here, to help those conversations start, right?
Yep.
Well, it has been so fun having you two here with us today.
Thank you.
Oh, I just loved it all. And again, it was just such good, different ways to look at it, too. And just to really, again, at the end of the day, it's all about the couple getting married.
That's right.
And you two bring that. You
That's
to
right.
celebrate that
And
story.
we love it.
Oh, who wouldn't want you to? Well, thank you, everybody, for tuning in to Wedding Day Podcast. And we'll see you next time. See you, bye.